House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. I'm not going to go through the, most of our MPs are now familiar, but I will go through some of the rules that we have for our witnesses. So interpretation in this video conference will work very much like a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. When you intervene, please make sure that your language channels is set to the language that you intend to speak, not the floor. This is very important. It will reduce the number of times we need to stop because the interpretation is inaudible for our participants. It will maximize the time we spend exchanging with each other. Now, I would ask all the witnesses with a nod, could you let us know that they have understood how to work this? Can I get a nod from the witnesses if you all understood how to change your channel if you want to change your language? Mr. Van Holt? Mr. Keenan, Mr. Lemaire, Mr. Gilroy. Who am I missing? I think I've got all the. Are we all good with that? Okay. Also, before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. Alors, assurez-vous que votre micro est éteint lorsque vous ne parlez pas. Nous sommes maintenant prêts à commencer.
Sure that your mic is switched off when you're not speaking. So welcome to our witnesses for today's hearing.
We'll change to English. So today, for our first hour, we have from the Canadian Horticultural Council, Mr. Brian Gilroy, President, and Mr. Jan van der Hout, Vice President. Welcome to both of you. Also from the Canadian Produce Marketing Association, Mr. Ron Lemaire, President. Welcome, Ron. And from the United Potato Growers of Canada, Mr. Ray Keenan, Chairman, and Mr. Kevin McIsaac, General Manager. So today, I know we're working to reduce the 10-minute to 7-minute, but because we did not have time to do it before this meetings, we will have a 10-minute opening statement by each organization. So if we can start with the Canadian Hort Council, up to 10 minutes between Mr. Gilroy and Jan van der Hout. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you to the committee members for working under these extraordinary circumstances on behalf of Canadians. My name is Brian Gilroy, and I'm the president of the Canadian Horticultural Council. I am also an apple grower from Meaford, Ontario.
Was it your message or from?
The Canadian Horticultural Council is an Ottawa-based voluntary not-for-profit national association that represents fruit and vegetable growers across Canada. They're involved in the production of over 120 different crops on over 14,237 farms, with farm cash receipts of $5.7 billion in 2018. As you can appreciate, with 120 different types of crops, our industry is very diverse. So too are the challenges we are facing in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Certain subsectors in the fresh fruit and vegetable industry are facing very acute and immediate challenges, such as potatoes and greenhouse vegetables, while others are making decisions on the future of their business. What is common among all commodities is that the impacts felt this year as a result of COVID-19 will have a lasting impact on their operations. I want to start off by saying that the CHC recognizes that the safety of Canadians and the integrity of our healthcare system remains the government's #1 priority. We're fully supportive of that. We appreciate the great efforts that the government has made to keep us all safe, as well as the measures to keep our country and economy afloat during this crisis. However, we are here today to point out that, like most countries, Canada faces serious challenges on an issue that is essential to a strong healthcare system and a healthy population. It's our national food security. We think this is an opportunity for the Government of Canada to continue to demonstrate how critically important our food security and supply is to Canada, and to underline that the governments have farmers' backs, to paraphrase the Prime Minister. Early in the pandemic, access to temporary foreign workers was the single most significant threat to our sector. We are grateful to the federal government for its actions, exempting international farm workers from travel restrictions, and for providing some financial support to employers of foreign workers to help cover the extraordinary costs of the 2-week isolation protocol. However, a number of obstacles have made the flow of critical workers untenable. Many farms will receive merely a portion of the workers that they rely on. Again, we do recognize the work that departments that ESDC, IRCC, along with Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada have put in to get workers into Canada. We appreciate that. But the government has been using statistics in their briefings that do not reflect the situation on the ground. For example, the government has pointed out that in the month of April, Canada received 10,066 workers compared to 13,000 in April 2019. However, that 10,066 includes workers that were supposed to arrive in March, but were delayed when the travel restrictions were put in place. Based on the numbers we have found internally, the data that we have compiled shows that so far, Ontario, which also coordinates arrivals for the Atlantic provinces, has received 78% of the requested workers. Quebec has received just 50%, and British Columbia has received about 54%. May and June are busy months for our growers, and is when they would typically be expecting a lot of their workers to arrive. We are very concerned with the small numbers we are seeing of workers that are fully processed to arrive. Without the guarantee of a reliable workforce, many growers are making decisions as to whether it is practical, let alone possible, to plant crops or tend crops, prune trees, harvest greenhouse vegetables, etc. Compounding these difficult decisions is the knowledge that they do not have a sufficient safety net behind them. Growing fruit and vegetables has significant input and overhead costs. It is not for the faint of heart. Many growers just can't take on those extra costs without a guarantee that the risk will not push them into bankruptcy. COVID-19 has also had a significant impact on potato growers in Canada. The closure of food service has triggered the collapse in the demand for frozen processed potato products, resulting in a huge on-farm surplus of processing potatoes from the 2019 crop that will no longer be utilized. In addition, the 2020 processing potato contract volumes have been reduced by 15 to 25%, and unsold seed potato inventories remain on farms as a result of the significant reduction in 2020 plantings. Over 700 million pounds of surplus processing and seed potatoes remain in storages on Canadian potato farms valued at around $110 million. The potato growers of Canada are speaking a little later, and they've asked the Minister of Agriculture for immediate action to compensate for losses from the surplus perishable potatoes that cannot be sold due to COVID-19. Growers are not immune to risk and uncertainty. Year after year, they take on risks associated with Mother Nature, pests, infestations, market volatility, to make sure Canadians have an abundance of healthy fruits and vegetables. With the record cold temperatures over the past fortnight, Mother Nature has been especially, I wrote difficult, but cruel so far this season. In these extraordinary times, more than ever, growers need concrete assurances that the government will have their back. The government has announced several measures, such as the emergency wage subsidy, the emergency business account. Unfortunately, many family farms will not meet the eligibility criteria. The $5 billion going to Farm Credit Canada is not beneficial, as taking on additional debt will not help our growers recover or backstop losses. We understand that business risk management programs are there with the intention of protecting farmers from disastrous losses, but cuts to program funding and changes to the eligibility criteria have rendered the programs, namely agri-stability, ineffective for most farmers. Changes made in 2013 to the reference margin limits and the limitations of what expenses can be deemed eligible makes it very difficult for even very devastating scenarios to trigger a payment. CHC, together with the Ag Growth Coalition members, which represents various sectors across the agriculture industry, has outlined its recommendations to the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Finance for immediate changes to these business risk management programs. These are needed to help see farmers through this crisis, to know that Canada supports those who grow their food. We have requested that the agri-stability trigger be increased to 90% beginning for the 2020 program year, or more generally, the program year that covers the 2020 crop year for edible horticultural farms, and that the program covers 85% of losses below this trigger. To cover any immediate extraordinary costs for growers, we have also requested an immediate injection of a minimum of 5% of a producer's 2018 allowable net sales into their agri-invest accounts, and waiving the requirement for the grower to match the contribution. This would help give confidence to growers in the short term. We have recommended that these emergency coverage measures should be coupled with the review of the reference margin limit. It's outdated. If a farm is forced to reduce farmed acreage and or reduce output per acre as a result of delayed or insufficient labor or value chain supply disruptions, CHC has stated that particular consideration should be given to waiving structural change provisions for edible horticultural farms. The Canadian Horticultural Council is prepared to work with Agriculture Agri-Food Canada to refine any of these recommendations and minimize the risk of any unintended consequences or moral hazard. I think what is important to note is that we are not asking the government for a blank check. Making improvements to a program like agri-stability will allow for a mechanism for farmers to recoup at least some of what has been lost. Again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I look forward to any questions you may have, and I will now turn it over to my colleague, Jan Vander.
So now, sorry, we're up to 10 minutes, so we have to move on to our next witness on this one, and you might have a chance to come back later through the questions. So now, for the Canadian Produce Marketing Association, Mr. Ron Lemaire, you have up to 10 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Lemaire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. On behalf of the Canadian fresh fruit and vegetable sector, I welcome the opportunity to share our comments regarding the financial repercussions that the COVID-19 pandemic posed for the fresh produce industry and its supply chain. CPMA represents the entire fresh fruit and vegetable industry from farm gate to dinner plate. Our comments are reflective of a wide array of members who work daily to provide Canadians with fresh and healthy fruit and vegetable options they demand, and have continued to do so during these extremely challenging and stressful times. To begin, CPMA would like to recognize and express our industry's appreciation for the high level of engagement and collaboration the federal government has shown in working with industry during these challenging times. In particular, I would like to thank the government for their flexibility and collaboration with industry in granting exemptions to international travel restrictions for temporary foreign workers, and in providing some financial support to employers for foreign workers to help recover costs for the 2-week isolation protocol. We look forward to the ongoing working relationship to find solutions to mitigate impact of the outbreak on Canadian families and to ensure that they will be able to continue to put our safe, healthy, and nutritious fruit and vegetable products on their tables throughout this crisis and afterwards. With Canadians staying home and buying patterns shifting during the pandemic, we have seen retail sales up 8% for vegetables and 5% for fruit. But at the same time, consumers are spending less time browsing grocery stores for unique items, and sales for shorter shelf life products and specialty items are lower. While the CPMA members within our national retail category have navigated COVID effectively to meet consumer demand for produce items, there are many other companies within the supply chain that are not so fortunate. Food service represents 30% of our value chain, and the catastrophic impact of this sector and those who supply it will be felt for years to come. While meal delivery and curbside pickup has lifted food service produce sales from 0 to 20 and sometimes 30% of traditional volume, it will be a long recovery, as physical distancing and consumer fear will play a role in how restaurants reopen. For many, the physical space available, which cannot be changed to accommodate new social distancing requirements, while also allowing sufficient customer capacity, will be a major factor in the economic decision on whether to reopen. For those operators who still owe distributors for their product ordered when they close their doors, they will not be serviced when they try to reopen until they pay these bills. Many of our members are also being dramatically impacted due to the rising costs of inputs, access to labor, and operational changes. We are at a point where more effective programs to access operating capital without going into unmanageable debt for a sector that works with a very small margin and limited available capital are paramount, and I will touch on more of this later. In a post-COVID world, business continuity will be challenging as we transition. It is crucial that the government ensure the supply chain is supported from farm gate to dinner plate. Government programs created to adjusted to support produce industry must provide the necessary flexibility and adaptability and longevity to minimize losses to the industry. The impact to businesses in our sector is not only happening today, but will continue for the next 12 to 24 months. And the complexity and seasonality of our industry means both large and small scale operators must have access to programs and tools developed by government for the short and long term. CPMA recognizes and commends the speed at which the Government of Canada operated to create macro-level programs to support industry at the outset of the pandemic in Canada. Many of the programs created have provided support to segments of our supply chain. Yesterday's announcements are a good example, but moving forward, it will be important to provide more focused approach to reduce the unintended consequences and impacts to some businesses, which include increased debt, challenges accessing domestic labor, and more. In addition to foreign workers, the produce supply chain relies on a steady supply of domestic labor. The CERB has created unintended consequences in the short term for many packers, distributors, wholesalers, and small retailers who are facing greater challenges to hire at a time when Canadians are relying on them to provide the food they need. The Canadian Emergency Response Benefit must be adjusted to support unemployed Canadians without creating a disincentive for Canadians to work, as the $1,000 allowable monthly income amount is not enough encouragement during these unique times. Additionally, the Canadian Emergency Student Benefit has the potential to impact seasonal and summer employment opportunities within our sector. I would encourage greater flexibility for students to collect the benefit and work for essential service providers like agriculture and agri-food. On a positive note, programs like the Canadian Wage Subsidy have been key for those of our members who qualify. They were able to maintain staffing during the initial food service market shift. But now we must review this tool and potentially extend it beyond September for targeted essential services like the produce supply chain. This will help alleviate economic stress companies are forecasting under the new normal. Early in the pandemic, access to temporary foreign workers was the single most threat to our production, food security, and integrity of the food supply chain in Canada. While some of the industry's key labor concerns have been addressed to a point, logistical and financial challenges remain. CPMA would like to echo the concerns of our partners at the Canadian Horticultural Council about the significantly reduced number of workers who have been able to come to Canada, particularly looking ahead to harvest. CPMA also supports the recommendations made by the Hort Council in relation to the government's business risk management programs, including additional support for farmers through Ag Stability and Agri-Invest. We all know there will be winners and losers during this pandemic. As members of the committee are fully aware, the Canadian produce industry has been requesting that a financial protection tool for produce sellers be implemented for many years. Unfortunately, the COVID business environment has and will, over the next 2 years, drive businesses into bankruptcy, and our sector has no effective protection. Canadian produce sellers are now more than ever at risk in the event of a bankruptcy. Without a limited statutory deemed trust, we will potentially see more companies dragged into economic hardship. And at a time when food security is second only to healthcare in terms of priorities for all Canadians, it is crucial that the government provides all possible safeguards for the Canadian food supply chain, including a deemed trust mechanism for produce sellers and farmers. From growers to packers, shippers, processors, wholesalers, and retailers, our industry has incurred unprecedented costs to develop COVID-related business plans and new procedures to ensure business continuity and to prepare for the eventual return to work. Many CPMA members are and will need to address employee concerns by implementing physical social distancing measures and ensure access to PPE. Why is this important? In BC, one greenhouse packing operation had 30% of their workforce not show up to work one day following the announcement of a suspected COVID case. The need for PPE is recognized as necessary to ensure business continuity and staff morale while working to keep absenteeism low. In a survey completed last week, 87% of our members reported that they are actively purchasing PPE and other health screening tools. However, challenges pertaining to the access of these essential supplies have been noted by many CPMA members. A shortage of supplies and long lead times to order products like hand sanitizers, gloves, and N95 masks have only added to the complexity. I must note, the added cost of purchasing this equipment cannot sustainably be absorbed by the industry. While the announcement by the minister yesterday was encouraging, CPMA recommends that the government implement a PPE tax credit to support industry in procuring and the equipment needed to keep workers and the public safe. Additionally, the inconsistency of a harmonized delivery of isolation protocols and measures at a local level is also causing frustration across the industry. The need to have common risk-based models is vital to provide and enable competitiveness and public safety. Finally, we must also recognize trade and regulatory flexibility. This pandemic has clearly demonstrated the need to bolster our food security, to ensure the ongoing viability of our food system and strong domestic global strategy. The supply chain linkages to transportation, border access, ports of entry and exit must all be maintained. The regulations such as hourly service for truck drivers should be harmonized wherever possible, specifically with the US. The produce supply chain is a globally integrated model that relies on both domestic and international networks. Recognizing the government's effort to provide some flexibility within enforcement of non-food safety labeling requirements in order to ensure the smooth flow of essential products continues and is needed more than ever. Further flexibility to allow nutrition facts from other countries, especially the US, and to allow English-only mandatory labeling information in provinces other than Quebec would help to ensure the grocery stores can continue to provide food. And I apologize for being long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll now move to the United Potato Growers of Canada, Mr. Keenan and Mr. McIsaac. You have your organization has up to 10 minutes to make their statements. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, honourable members of the Standing Committee on Agriculture. Speaking today are myself and Ray Keenan from United Potato Growers of Canada. Our organization has been in existence since 2006 and was created to help growers improve profitability by sharing data based on the economic principles of supply and demand. We're funded with a per acre levy by growers across the country from Prince Edward Island to British Columbia. We would like to thank you for inviting our organization to share our thoughts on how this pandemic has affected the Canadian potato industry. First of all, we must look and see how the potato industry was doing before this pandemic began in the second week of March. Simply put, it was doing very well. We did have some harvest issues last fall, particularly in the province of Alberta and Manitoba, but overall our supply was fairly well matched with demand, and if anything was a bit short, creating a need to import potatoes from our neighbors in the United States. Our fresh sector saw strong demand and resulting good prices. A processing sector based largely on pre-season determined contracts was in an enviable position, responding to increased demand for the insatiable taste of French fries. Export markets were growing, and domestically, plant expansions in the provinces of Alberta by Cavendish Farms, in Manitoba by the J.R. Simplot Company, in Quebec by St. Arnaud, and in New Brunswick by McCain Foods, all required additional supplies of potatoes for 2020. The seed potato sector was increasing as well, largely to service the needs of the expanding processing sector. However, on Monday, March 16th, after our country began to self-isolate, we saw immediate changes in our potato markets, beginning first of all with table potatoes. Demand for fresh potatoes increased substantially as packers were challenged to keep shelves stocked, as consumers now staying home stocked up on staple nutritional foods like potatoes. It was commonplace to see produce managers and grocery stores move empty pallets as they waited for new skids to come into the store. Demand for table potatoes is still strong, but has become more stable in recent weeks as consumers have learned to cook again and really have enjoyed the experience. Potato chip producers also saw increased sales as consumers selected their favorite comfort food for the pandemic. It did take more time for the processing sector to react, but eventually, with sit-down portions of restaurants closed and only the drive-thrus open, the large volume of processed potatoes that entered the food service side of the industry was affected. French fry companies quickly realized their freezers were becoming full from factories that are designed to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Fryers began with taking downtime and shift layoffs to mitigate the effects, but eventually had to close plants at various times. Excruciating pain for growers then began as French fry companies began calling them and advising growers that they would not be buying all of the potatoes from them that they had earlier contracted. Growers were advised to sell those potatoes to another market. In the following weeks, the situation became even worse, with fry companies advising growers they would be cutting volume for next year's crop. Cuts were dependent on what market each one of these factories supplied, but ranged anywhere from 10 to 35%. The COVID-19 pandemic had similar effects on French fry sales in the United States and in European countries like Belgium and the Netherlands. Seed potato growers in Canada became the final victim in this COVID-19 pandemic as they began to receive calls from growers canceling their seed orders due to 2020 crop volume cuts by the processors. It is difficult for any segment of the supply chain to react to market adversity, but definitely hardest for seed growers that they are at the bottom of the supply chain. In addition, many of these growers have started multiplying varieties 3 years ago that are only now reaching the commercial stage. So our organization has the difficult task of trying to determine what supply of potatoes is needed to feed our country and export to others in the coming year. We can run several models, but we need to know two important input factors that are right now unknown. When do we start? And how long will it take us to get back to pre-COVID-19 consumption levels? Perhaps we'll not return to what we know as historical consumption. In the meantime, our growers need assistance, and there's planting time is here now for the 2020 crop, so there's a real sense of urgency. United Potato Growers of Canada supported the Canadian Potato Council in a letter on April 23rd to the Honourable Marie-Claude Bibeau requesting assistance to deal with the effects of COVID-19 and preserve food security in Canada. On May 5th, the Government of Canada announced an industry support program of which an initial $50 million fund would be used to purchase unsold inventories such as potatoes, poultry, and other agricultural products. There are no details yet as to how this program will work. However, our organization thanks Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Agriculture Minister Bibeau for acknowledging in that announcement that our sector needs help. At this time, it is clear that it falls short of our urgent needs, unfortunately. Specific to our industry, the Canadian Potato Council has contacted each province in Canada and identified the surplus potatoes on Canadian farms to be valued collectively at $105 million. The components of this big pile of potatoes include processing potatoes valued at $92 million and seed potatoes valued at $13 million. Converted to pounds, this pile is about 760 million pounds. This is a massive quantity of potatoes to move in a short time. These surplus potatoes have a shelf life, so action must be taken now. UPGC potatoes into the fresh market, but unfortunately that market is now approaching saturation levels, in addition to the difficulty in locating sheds with additional run times. Dehydration would also be an option, but our 3 plants in Canada are currently running at full capacity, and their markets have also been hit by food service restrictions as well. Cattle feeders are another possibility, but basically they only return trucking costs back to the potato growers. Food banks are an attractive option to avoid food waste, but logistically require extensive time to organize transportation, delivery, and receiving. We simply do not have the infrastructure to handle the volume that must move. Many of our growers do support food banks now and are familiar with some of these difficulties. And the final option for these surplus potatoes would be composting or burial, both of which need to meet environmental and plant health guidelines. All of the above scenarios which I point out point to a series of options that growers cannot handle at their own risk and their own expense. Outside help is needed to begin removing this product now, with completion over the next 3 months to avoid environmental and plant health risks for the 2020 crop. We need help now and not in 3 months' time. Your input and assistance as the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food is critical to the future food security of Canada. Given all of the negative situations created by the COVID-19 pandemic, one positive has been a greater appreciation of our food produced in Canada and an increasing desire of consumers to support the producers who put it on their tables. Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to address you today.
So, okay, thank you. Did you say that Mr. Keenan was going to come in, or is that all your time, Mr.
Yes. Okay.
You want to go ahead, Mr. Keenan?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Almost 3 minutes left, or I think something like that. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Keenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity and to speak with you here today. I am chairman of the United Potato Growers of Canada and also operate our farm operates a growing and fresh pack operation delivering potatoes on a daily basis to chain stores and also in the past to food service when it existed. I have to echo the comments of those made here before me today. Although we're grateful for the dollars that the Prime Minister has allocated to the potato and poultry industry, unfortunately, the potato industry is less than half of what the potato industry could use on its own to facilitate this flood of potatoes that we have now available to market. One of the things that I would like to articulate to this committee is, as government searches for methods of doing things, certainly the announcement to put these potatoes through food banks or to cattle feed, I'm not certain that the logistics have been worked out very well on that. Certainly because these potatoes, processing potatoes, as Kevin mentioned, do have a shelf life. They have to be, if we bring processing potatoes into our packaging plant, they will yield out about 50 to 70% yield return into packages. In other words, there's a huge shrink to them. So we still have a lot of potatoes that don't have a home in a fresh pack that would make it in the processing because they have more uses at the processing level. Having said that, the feedlot operations today, when with the problems they've had in Western Canada with the feedlots or with the meat packing plants, there's a backup of cattle on the farms. So I think we need to be careful about making assumptions these potatoes can go through cattle. Some of them can, but they must be disposed of. The more important thing, I think, is the distribution of the money, how it gets distributed fairly to the provinces. And I would like to make a recommendation that the fastest and most effective way would be to do it through the provincial governments, in turn through the potato boards in the various provinces to take their advisement on how to use it. Because each province has a different situation, and it's certainly one size does not fit all clear across the country, especially today in the heavy processing sectors like New Brunswick, Manitoba, and in Alberta are especially hit hard with processing extra potatoes.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much. And now we'll go to our question round, and we'll start with Ms. Rood, up to 6 minutes. Go ahead, Ms. Rood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your presentations today. I'm going to start, and perhaps it's for the Canadian Produce Marketing, maybe the Hort Council wants to jump in here. You kind of touched on, and we know that our seasonal agriculture workers and temporary foreign workers play a really integral part in the produce industry, especially. I know you were pleased to see the exemption for our TFWs and our seasonal workers after our party really did help push the government for this exemption. And growing fruits and vegetables, we have a significant input and overhead cost going in, and it's obviously a critical time of year. As I know, in my riding in particular, we've got a lot of our farmers out planting their vegetable crops, and as you alluded to, we've had some pretty downright brutal weather this past week for our fruit tree growers, trying to avoid frost right now with where they are at in their production. And I know that there's also some farmers who are actually ready to go out and harvest their crop in the form here in Ontario of asparagus. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of let us know where, I know where we're kind of at with receiving workers, but how is this going to affect, for instance, first of all, our asparagus farmers and those who have early crops? Because I know we are still missing a lot of workers and seeing that there's issues with paperwork with some of our workers coming from some places, and how is that going to affect our food supply going down the road as we look into the fall with what volume we may or may not see as farmers may cut back on their acreage this year?
Thanks for the question, Ms. Rod. And I will defer some of this to CHC, as they're definitely in a strong position to talk to boots on the ground. But I'll make a quick comment to everything you said. Hits it right on the head relative to your question. We're not only going to see issues now, and I feel horrible for the asparagus industry that I understand will see 50% of their crop not come out of the ground, and in some cases even more impact. But you look down the road, and it's ensuring that we have the workers for midsummer, end of summer, and for the fall harvest. That's going to be fundamental. So it's not just an immediate issue. It is the long game also that was alluded to by the other speakers. And I'll hand it over to Hort Council to continue.
If I can just carry on from Ron there, then one of the things that I think that is being overlooked is the exposure that we have as producers to having a large exodus of workers if there's an outbreak on our farms. Mm-hmm. And imagine that an asparagus grower, because that's the imminent one right now, they go through all this process to get their workers, they go through the isolation period, they go to work, and then 2 weeks later, there's an outbreak on their farm. And what will the impacts of that be? And so we need to ensure that growers have confidence that they're going to be supported by the federal government when this is all over.
Great. And I know we still don't know what all the impacts are going to be when all of this is over, like post-harvest. So, and as a farmer myself, I know I wouldn't want to be taking on more debt during this because we don't know what's going to happen. So how can the government support farmers post-harvest at this point?
I'm going to start with that. And I mentioned the tax credit model as one potential tool. And there are a few other pieces of current input costs. We're looking down the barrel of regulatory change under the Safe Food for Canadian regs, where lot codes of consumer packed goods will require new packaging for many growers. The packaging costs alone under this current environment could add will add additional economic burden as we move forward. What we would ask is that the government postpone the implementation or delay that implementation of the lot code requirements on consumer packed goods for produce items, to give the growers an opportunity to adjust to the current market, maintain current inventories of packaging, and continue to roll out and meet consumer demand. The other side, I mentioned the tax credit, and the other piece of that also starts looking at creative models that enable wage subsidies. And we've heard the provinces look at how do we enable essential services, and food seems to be missed out. On a call earlier today, there was note that Quebec, BC, and PEI may be the only provinces. How can the federal government support and enable the provinces and a federal model that can have some additional wage top up for farmers and produce supply chain operators to take some of the burden away from the costs and stress they're under for production?
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, how much time is left?
1.5 minutes.
Okay, I'll be quick here. I'm going to switch over to the potato growers, and I understand that you're sitting on lots of inventory. As growing up on a potato farm myself, I'm very familiar with how this industry works and still involved a little bit here. We have a lot of input costs. It costs a lot per acre. We've seen in the US some of our processing potato farmers having to disc under their crops. You kind of alluded to the fact that there is, I believe you said somewhere, $90 million worth of processing inventory, yet what the government has come out with is $50 million, which is obviously a drop in the bucket and not going to even touch nearly half of what's left over for the processing sector. So do you see them cutting back a lot of acres this year then, just because of the decrease in demand on the commercial retail versus the retail side of things?
Yeah. Will I take that, Kevin?
Go ahead.
Yes, we are. The retail business today is very insecure because with a number that we even don't pay a lot of attention to, the food service potatoes that are not going anywhere right now are simply being saturated into the fresh market. That's causing a great concern. The reduction in the processing contracts is significant. So that's going to have a huge effect on the bottom line of our growers. So from that point, it is a huge concern going forward, Leanne. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Thank you, Ms. Rood. And maintenant, Monsieur Drouin pour 6.
Mr. Drouin for 5 minutes.
See you at our committee. I know it's not our first meeting that we've had the opportunity to have this discussion. Thanks for the call. I know Ms. Lude talked about it. I think it was we're all in this together, and it was a global effort to try and resolve the TFW's issue. And you and I have certainly had our fair share of calls that was already about a month and a half ago on this particular issue. I want you to talk to me about the challenges of your industry, and I know we've announced $77.5 million to help the sector adapt to COVID-related issues. And I know I've visited some plants; some are automated. But are you speaking with some of your members? Are they looking at potentially automation to fight this COVID thing, because now plants are not designed to respect physical distancing, for instance, so that has an impact on production. Can you elaborate on that, please?
So, and we are appreciative of the $77 million for the process industry, and that our supply chain does fit within that portfolio. The gaps that we're going to see is, yes, industry can automate some areas, but not everything. So the costs that have been incurred relative to whether it's plexiglass barriers and or drop in production or impact of production because of the physical distancing, the personal protective equipment that is hard to come by but essential and being purchased by the sector to protect employees. All of these pieces, we understand, do qualify under the blanket of funds. The challenge is it won't be enough, because we're one sector amongst the many processors. And you're looking at meat or pork as an example. That industry could eat it all up in one fell swoop. But I know that's not the intent. I know they're looking at small to medium-sized business and large. But will we be able to automate? Yes, but I look at the greenhouse industry as an example. There's only elements within greenhouse, and Jan's on the call who can talk to this, that could apply the automated approach. Everything else is hands-on.
Yeah, and I think you've mentioned, yes, $77 million. It probably won't be enough. I think the minister has been clear. It's a first step. The prime minister has been cleared, announced it on live television to Canada. It's just the first step. In those discussions, are provinces jumping on board? Like, are you having good discussions with? We talked about essential services and providing subsidies to essential workers. I know we've announced $3 billion. I think you cut off for me, but PEI is one of the provinces that mentioned agricultural workers are essential services workers.
That's right. That's what I heard, and I have to confirm that. But that was on a call today where it was identified by Agriculture Canada, as well. In Quebec and in BC, there was this beginning approaches to identifying the agri-food sector. Further details I have to gather. How do we get the provinces on board? Well, we are in discussion with the big provinces, and there is a slow pickup and recognition that, yes, we need to be included in that wage subsidy or wage top-up. But I hate to say it, it is a slow boat, and our guys can't wait any longer. How the federal government can support in the FedProp territorial calls is essential to encouraging the provinces to recognize this sector is what makes the country operate. Without us, no one's going to eat, and we are going to see a COVID environment that'll be much more challenging.
And I certainly agree. We're all in this together, and everyone needs to step up to make sure that Canadians can eat. Thank you, Mr. Lemaire. Appreciate it. Mr. Gilroy, you've in your opening statement, you've mentioned that would like you're advocating. I think it's the same position as the Grain Farmers of Ontario, a 5% investment in the Agri-Invest account. Have you done an analysis on what that represents in terms of cost or a dollar figure attached to that?
I'm sorry, I haven't. I'm certainly I could get that number to you fairly rapidly, but that would be a number that within Agri-Food Canada they'd be able to supply rapidly, I would think.
Okay, well, if you do have that number, you can provide it to the committee, Mr. Chair. I would appreciate that number if it's possible. If you do have it, if you don't, no big deal. But I would certainly appreciate that. Mr. McIsaac, I only have one potato grower in my region, so I would never underestimate my knowledge on potato growing, but I think you've touched on a really good point in terms of the industry having to readapt and the consumers the consumers are changing. And are you looking at how post-COVID Canadians are eating more at home? Potentially, they may not go back to restaurants because of X, Y, Z different reasons. How does your industry adapt to that? And are you looking, and how are you having those discussions with McCain, Cavendish, and other processors who are in that particular market and who are in that direct restaurant market? How's that going to impact your farmers essentially?
Very quickly.
So certainly we do have those discussions, but our industry is so largely driven by the processing sector. That has really been our bright shining star in the past few years, where we've had other issues with consumption of our fresh product. So we really we really need to perhaps retool the way some of that's done. But the reality is that's about 70% of our business in Canada currently.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McIsaac. Alors merci. Et maintenant, Monsieur.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you to our witnesses. I will start with Mr. Gilroy. You've talked about agri-stability, and you said that it should be increased quickly to 90% for 2020. We already know that it was asked for at 85% before the crisis. So this shows the important need to ensure the crops. What would be the impact if the government doesn't move on this?
Thank you for the question. I apologize. My internet, I have rural internet, and your question was a bit fuzzy, but what is the effect that this will have if it doesn't happen? Growers are reducing.
Yes, if we don't improve agri-stability, what would be the impact on fruits and vegetables production in Canada and Quebec?
We've already heard that asparagus production is estimated to be down 50%. A lot of people who are planting annual crops are reducing the amount that they're planting to a for sure manageable level. What I hear more often than not is they're reducing plantings by 20%. Mother Nature has added to the complications this year by wiping out close to 300 acres of transplanted onions in the Holland Marsh this past week. There are pressures on the.
Est-ce que Monsieur Gilroy, est-ce qu'on pourrait résumer ça?
Mr. Gilroy, could we summarize this by saying that if there's no intervention in agri protection, that we could threaten the food security at the national level? Do you agree with this?
It's certainly a possibility. Yes.
Parfait, je vous remercie beaucoup. La deuxième question.
Thank you very much. Second question, Mr. Gilroy or Mr. Van der Hout, if it's easier for him from the point of view of the internet. For foreign workers, the government uses the percentage of 86% of workers who have arrived. And you said that it's 78% in the Atlantic and 38% in Quebec and 47% in Ontario. So we're far from the 86% figure. So the fears of lack of workers are justified?
The number, we updated those numbers from the original brief. Quebec has received just 50% and British Columbia 54%, with Ontario and the Atlantic around 78%. But yes, there is still a critical shortage of workers on some farms.
Parfait, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Perfect. Thank you very much for confirming those figures. And the other question is this. As far as foreign workers are concerned, the federal government has announced a direct assistance of $1,500 per foreign workers because it decided to delegate the quarantine task to producers. So that $1,500 was announced. And in the presentation, it was a flat rate amount. If you had a foreign worker, you would receive $1,500. But according to comments, there would be a deadline to submit an application. And now you have to file your invoices. And now this $1,500 has become a maximum that is difficult to get. So could you tell us about this? Do you have any echoes from your producers, from your producers concerning this?
So I'm a greenhouse cucumber grower, and we hire Mexican workers through both the SOP and TFW program. And we do have workers, even today, we have workers in isolation. So there's a few parts to that question. One part is we are paying the workers while they're in isolation. So that comes to about $900. The other $600 is difficult to assign very specifically. I really believe that it should be $1,500 flat rate per worker. And this would help us to deal with offsetting some of the hidden costs associated with isolating the workers.
Donc, ce que je comprends, c'est que les producteurs.
What I understand is that the agricultural workers now have a lot on their hands, and they would like to get $1,500 each time that they have received the foreign workers. To compensate for the fact that they had to pay them during their isolation. And also there's the airfare that was more costly, and the workers arrived later. So I hope that the government understands this, because I was a little bit disappointed by the comments that I heard about this. My second question is for Mr. Lemaire. No, sorry, Mr. Keenan. Mr. Keenan, you said that the amounts that are allotted should be distributed to the provinces and to Quebec, because those are the governments that are closer to the people and that are aware of the needs. So could you tell me what you meant by that exactly? Thank you.
The vehicle that the federal government uses to move money quickly and efficiently gets to be a very cumbersome way of doing it. A year ago, we had a situation in Prince Edward Island where we had applied for ag recovery. It's a long process to get that money, but when you do get it, it's a very efficient way of distributing the money as it comes to the province.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. And now, Mr. McGregor, for up to 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing before our committee. It's good to see some familiar faces in our virtual world. I think I'll start with the Canadian Horticultural Council and just going on along on the line of the temporary foreign workers. So in your opening statement, you've given different figures than what the government presented because you said that the government's figures seem a little higher than they should be because they combined March and April together. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. The April numbers that are quoted and compared to last year aren't the same. It's not apples and apples because it March 15th, I think, or 17th is when the workers stopped coming. And so those workers from March 17th and till the end of the month, plus the April workers were due to come in.
Okay, so the government has painted a slightly rosier picture than the reality on the ground for your members. However, we want to look at ways in which we can address this problem effectively. Where in your mind is the main problem coming? Like, are we finding the delays because airline travel has collapsed, or because our workers are afraid to come to Canada because they're afraid of risking exposure to the virus? Is it still too much paperwork? Where more can we find room for improvement to ensure that we have a reliable labor pool for our producers in the upcoming months?
Thank you for the question. From my point of view, the Canadian government has really focused on how important these workers are and are doing everything that they can to get the workers here. Some of the issues are related to supply countries. Mexico is in a real mess. Their computers were hacked just before COVID hit, and that's created all sorts of issues. Guatemala is used a lot, and they were very slow in coming on stream, but that has started. So a big thank you to Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada, and all related ministries for the work on that file. We're just stating that it's not quite as good as they say it is.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Yeah, we need to deal with the facts. Ron, I think I'll turn to you in the Canadian Produce Marketing Association. I'm glad to hear in your opening statement you mentioned the deemed trust, the Perishable Agricultural Commodities Act. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe in the last Parliament we had unanimous recommendations for such a body from 2 standing committees.
Yes, we did, and the industry thought we would be moving forward. We're hopeful that with the current government and the current pandemic situation where people will see the need, and we've identified that amazingly how quickly legislation can move forward and be approved. I think this is essential. I think our sector needs it immediately. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to see bankruptcies. We're seeing them already in the US. If we look at it as a North American scope, we will see them start coming down the pipe as companies cannot meet their commitments, cannot open their doors, don't decide to plant, or, there's a range of variables here. So we need to have some backstop there so that they are able to, if selling into a company that's gone bankrupt, be considered a secured creditor.
Yeah, well, and can you maybe just very briefly, because I want to get one more question in, just tell me why the existing government programs are not adequate? Because when we did ask the government in the previous Parliament, they said, well, we're working on something and there's existing provisions. Why is that not adequate, and why do we have to move to a deemed trust?
The other programs don't satisfy the bankruptcy issue, in short.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I will happily remind the government that we still have this issue, and hopefully we can use this crisis to really illustrate the position that your industry is in and really move ahead with that. So thank you for those comments. I think my last question will just be to the United Potato Growers. Mr. McIsaac, you really illustrated the tremendous hurdles that your industry is facing right now, a lot of options, and none of them look really good. And I know the government has come forward with that $50 million, and it's welcome. We may need to see more, but I'm just looking at the Herculean efforts we need to employ to move, you said, I think 760 million pounds of potatoes. Yeah, how do we go about doing that? I mean, do we need to employ a large scale freight service? I mean, it may not all be able to be used as food, but one thing for sure, those potatoes can't remain where they are.
No, that's very true. The issue is it's got to be done right now because we're heading into another growing season. Potatoes like this, as they're being removed from storage and used in some other way, can cause problems for our new crop coming on. So that's our concern. But it's a task that can be done. It's a costly one to do, but that's why we need some funding to do it. The most important thing is we need to get that material removed out of the marketplace now. Our new crop will soon be coming on in BC and in Ontario in a very short amount of time. So we need to have that gone.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ray.
It's
okay.
It's pretty much, oh yeah, so time is up. So thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Mr. McIsaac. And that's it for this panel. I want to thank the Canadian Hort Council, Canadian Produce Marketing Association, and also the United Potato Growers for Canada for this very interesting conversation. And with that, we shall break for 5 minutes. If everybody can set their clock and be back in 5 minutes, and we'll start the second panel. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the invitation.
back, everyone. And I'd just like to make a few comments for the benefit of the new witnesses. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can either click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. Okay. And also, interpretation in this video conference will work very much like a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. When you intervene, please make sure your language channel is set to the language you intend to speak, not the floor. This is very important. It will reduce the number of times we need to stop because of interpretation. The interpretation is inaudible for the participant. And it will maximize the time we spend exchanging with each other. And now, and when you are not speaking, please put your mic on mute. I would now like to welcome our witness for this second hour. And we have from Bio and Power, Mr. Earl Brubaker, Manager of Operation. Also from Food and Consumer Products of Canada, Carla Benton, Senior Vice President, Government Relationship. And also from White Food Incorporated, Elizabeth Carwaya, President, and Philippe Blondin, Vice President. So welcome to you all. And we can start with up to 10 minutes opening statement, and we'll start with Food and Consumer Product. Ms. Carla Benton, if you want to start us with 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Just ensuring everyone can hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today to provide insights into the study on the Canadian response to the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Carla Benton, and I am the Senior Vice President of Government Relations for Food and Consumer Products based here in Ottawa. For nearly 60 years, our National Industry Association has been representing the companies that manufacture and distribute the vast majority of the food, beverage, and consumer goods found on store shelves, restaurants, and in people's homes. Our member companies range from small, independently and private-owned companies to large global multinationals, together making about 85% of the products available on grocery and drugstore shelves. FCPC's membership is truly national, providing value-added jobs to urban and rural Canadians in almost every federal riding of the country. The food and beverage manufacturing sector is the largest manufacturing employer in Canada. The industry employs more than 300,000 Canadians with high-quality, middle-class jobs from coast to coast. We commend the government on their openness and timeliness in their response to the exceptional circumstances presented by COVID-19. Throughout the pandemic, we've appreciated working collaboratively with the government and look forward to playing a central role in Canada's economic recovery. We appreciate the government's public recognition at the highest levels of the importance of the 300,000 workers in the food manufacturing industry across Canada, and formal recognition of grocery, pharmacy, convenience, and pet food stores as critical infrastructure. This helps to motivate workers in our industry and provides the necessary reassurance. I'll continue here. This helps to motivate workers in our industry and provides the necessary reassurances to our members to allow them to plan and operate during this unpredictable period. With our highly integrated North American industry, we are pleased with the government's commitment in keeping the border open to allow for the free flow of ingredients, products, and essential workers. Our members also welcome the government's efforts to allow for the entry of temporary foreign workers and equipment technicians. In response to COVID-19, our member companies have pivoted and stepped up to the plate to provide the essential services, the essential products on store shelves. Since March, however, our members have faced immediate and unprecedented challenges, costs, and uncertainties that jeopardize the industry's long-term viability. Costs associated with the compliance of new health and safety measures for workers, purchasing of personal protective equipment, closure of restaurants, and training new employees have all risen significantly. As well, the growing uncertainty in securing access to ingredients packaging, people, and PPE have revealed significant and deep-rooted vulnerabilities in the supply chain. These mounting costs and growing uncertainties are not sustainable. We recently conducted a survey with our members that capture these concerns, costs, and impact. Consider a few. For example, over 50% experience up to a 25% reduction in productivity due to COVID-19 mitigation measures. 75% experienced moderate to significant input cost increases. 25 to 30% anticipate raw material shortages. 35% reported experiencing PPE shortages, and 75% are experiencing increased absenteeism in plants, and 40% expected significant training costs as a result. We are pleased that some of these concerns have been addressed by the government's $77.5 million announcement on May 5th. We believe this is a positive step forward. We are also pleased that the Prime Minister acknowledged that this represents an initial announcement and that more remains to be done. But we are really concerned that the $77.5 million won't even cover the costs already incurred by the primary meat processors, leaving nothing else for the rest of the industry that relies on these very ingredients. We need to work urgently with the government to secure additional and immediate funds to cover mounting pandemic-related costs, which are needed now for our members to keep the doors open and provide food for Canadians. The challenges that existed before COVID-19 have only gotten worse. Access to labor is the prime example. Before the pandemic, there were approximately 10,000 vacancies in the food and beverage manufacturing sector, and this has only gotten worse. While we appreciate the efforts of the government to introduce the relief for affected Canadians, the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, or CERB, has had an adverse impact on members' ability to fill positions. So we wish to partner with the government on a program to help incentivize Canadians to work in our industry. And we'd also like to see additional financial incentives like a wage top-up or heroes pay for workers in our sector, as well as retroactive removal of income tax for wage top-ups provided by the private sector. While we appreciate the government's financial commitment of $3 billion on May 7th to provide a wage top-up to essential workers, we also urge the federal government to encourage the provinces to include our industry. In order to improve our industry's productivity levels, we not only require readily available labor, but we also need to ensure that the workforce we recruit is properly trained. We require support to help offset these training costs, which can vary from $2,000 for a production line worker to $5,000 for a highly skilled specialized worker. We therefore suggest an employer-trained tax credit worth $29 million. In order to ensure that Canadians continue to have access to essential products on store shelves, we need to work together on a whole-of-government economic recovery plan. With such a significant economic footprint in Canada, it will be critical for our industry to play a central role in rebuilding Canada's economy. The government will need to focus investments that help build a robust and competitive food and consumer product manufacturing sector, in addition to creating domestic capacity to supply the ongoing increased need for PPE and hand sanitizer. Part of this will need to involve a serious conversation about the significant government-imposed regulatory costs. We are specifically referring to the proposed labeling costs, including front-of-package labeling and potential service fees. Prior to COVID-19, Health Canada was proposing unprecedented changes to the way our industry makes, packages, and sells products. While we support regulations that improve public health and product safety, we are concerned with the host of costly regulatory proposals that do not contribute to these objectives. A comprehensive reevaluation or rethink of the regulatory agenda in Canada in collaboration with industry will be needed. In the weeks ahead, it's important to note that it will be harder than ever to attract and keep investment here in Canada, as other countries are looking to repatriate manufacturing and become more self-reliant. We are already seeing growing pressure for companies in Canada to leave and take their jobs with them. We can't let this happen. Canada needs to step up and build a robust manufacturing sector that provides incentives for companies to stay and create jobs for Canadians. In summary, our recommendations include the following. Number one, emergency funds to help offset COVID-related costs incurred by our industry, the food manufacturers. Number two, develop a program to incentivize unemployed Canadians to fill the existing 10,000 vacancies in the food manufacturing industry. Work together to upskill and transition unemployed Canadians with the creation of a 29 million employer training tax credit. Number four, ensure that international trade, especially with our southern partner, is rules-based and science-based and allows for the predictable flow of ingredients, products, and people. And number five, develop a domestic manufacturing strategy in collaboration with industry and provincial governments that builds a robust consumer products and PPE manufacturing sector in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benton. And now we'll go to White Food Incorporated. So Elizabeth Kawaja, I hope I pronounced it right. And Mr. Philip Blondin, between you, you have up to 10 minutes. Go ahead. Can you unmute your mic, please, Ms.
Sorry, there. Unmuted.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I would like to first thank the members of the committee for inviting White's Foods here today. It's an honor for Philippe Blondin and myself to be able to share this information with you and hopefully to represent the voice of our industry. We are the largest pickle and pepper manufacturer in Canada, and today are also sadly one of the last. Our company began just outside Montreal in 1892. Since that time, we have not only been manufacturing and selling food to the Canadian market, we have been employers, buyers, and charitable givers to our community. Since our company was founded, we've purchased the Mrs. White's brand, the Coronation brand from Kraft Foods, and finally the Stubbs brand in 2012 out of bankruptcy. Each of these pickle and pepper manufacturers struggled to remain alive in Canada for decades, but were unable to do so prior to our acquisition of them. In 2011, the Bix brand left Canada and moved to the United States. We are in effect the last one standing in our industry. 2 years ago, we decided to open a new facility. We saw many advantages to operating south of the border, including lower minimum wages and often less restrictive business environments. However, we chose to stay in Canada. We have always chosen Canada. We are now, as I said, more or less the only ones left in Canada in our industry, and we are so proud to still be here. Our relationship to the communities in which we work runs deep. In St. Louis, we are the town's largest employer. In Wallaceburg, we're providing jobs in a previously extremely underemployed region of Chatham-Kent. We buy from local farmers and view ourselves as members of the community. We have always taken our role as corporate citizens extremely seriously. We support local charities both financially and with our human resources. Without us, jobs in the cities in which we operate would be lost. Many Quebec and Ontario farmers would be unable to sell their crops, and the communities we call our own would suffer significantly. The agriculture and agri-food sector are Canada's largest employers. It's easy to forget this from our urban centers, but we are the engine of our national economy, and we are rooted in our national identity. Imagine the Canadian landscape without our farmers and without our rural communities. We're here today to make clear that an omission to help us during this challenging time will make that sad vision a reality. A Canada with far fewer farmers, with significant unemployment, with rural decay, and with an entirely imported food supply. Starting a business like ours takes significant investment, and for those who are not as committed to Canada and to our farmers as we are, there's little reason to be here. Operating out of Ohio or Michigan is cheaper and provides easy access to our market. Without the support of our government, losses that result from the pandemic to the agri-food sector will not likely be gained back in years to come. As we at White's are pivoting to be retail packers, Canada will be forced to pivot into being exclusively an importer of agricultural goods. I hope you agree with us that this is not the Canada any of us recognizes or desires. As a company who views itself as community members, we prioritize above all else the safety of our team. We have slowed production in order to maintain social distance, bought as much PPE as we can, and engaged in training and safety precautions everywhere possible. This is costly and time-consuming. We, like all of you, are aware not only of the closure of meat packing plants in Canada, but also of many non-meat food manufacturers in the United States who have closed due to COVID, but who've received less press. The risks of the virus hitting our plant and us having to shut our doors during crop are very real. We are doing all we can to avoid this and to make our team feel safe coming to work each day. We would have it no other way, but we need help to continue to do this. We have invested $52 million in our facilities in Canada in the last few years, including $23 million in our new facility in Chatham, Kent. Prime Minister Trudeau recently said that more needs to be done when he referred to the programs being offered to sustain the agricultural industry in Canada. We are here today to echo very clearly that yes, indeed, more needs to be done. We have lost our food service sector, which has left companies like ours to fight in a crazy game of survival in which we are forced to become almost entirely retail providers. As anyone who understands food manufacturing knows, this is neither easy nor cheap. We are facing staggering wage increases to combat current unemployment subsidies and receiving notifications from retailers about their commitment to maintaining current prices. We have inventory that was planned for restaurants, which will go to waste. We are awaiting a rapidly approaching single annual crop in Canada and have neither the manpower nor the resources to equip ourselves to process it in time. This likely means the shelves of our grocery stores will see shortages as we move into the fall. I would encourage you to look through the middle aisles of your grocer and note how many items require product from local farmers and food processors like us. Any company like ours that produces both retail and food service, which is most of us, is very likely to be unable to transition quickly enough to fill those shelves and replace the food service business we have lost. Add to this that the profits from food service sales are gone, and you can begin to imagine our reality. Lost margins, massive operational expenses as we transition, increased wage costs and wage shortages, inventory going in the garbage, little room to increase prices. The natural conclusion to this is empty shelves, the destruction of our agri-food industry, significant damage to growers, and eventually the loss of rural life. I don't mean to sound bleak, but hungry Canadians and deserted rural towns is the inevitable final chapter to this story if we are not afforded assistance. And this assistance needs to be both generous and swift. Our crop is around the corner and it doesn't come back for another year. As a result of our large investment in a new plant in southwestern Ontario, we were proudly able to bring a great deal of business back to Canada that was lost to the United States many years ago. Due to this recent growth and the metric currently used to assess wage subsidies, we cannot qualify for programs like the 75% wage subsidy. We have lost over 40% of our sales compared to last year, but this truth is hidden by the growth brought through our new facility. In other words, what appears to be sales growth is in fact not growth at all when one considers the expenses incurred in the last few months to accommodate much greater growth. Our costs continue to be in line with this anticipated growth from our new facility. We have lost almost all food service sales and are therefore left at a very significant loss with no government help. We ask that parameters around certain programs be more flexible so that they can be fair to everyone. Companies like ours who have invested in growth in Canada are providing more jobs in the last year in Canada and supporting more growers in Canada than last year cannot be measured against last year's pre-expansion sales. We need to be measured against what reasonable growth expectations were when we built a new facility and invested so heavily in Canada. The current metric effectively penalizes us for providing additional jobs and for buying more from our farmers. Companies with no planned growth are rewarded for cutting jobs and losing sales. This was not the intent of the wage subsidy, but it is certainly the result of the current system. And so in conclusion, we are asking for the help of our government. We are asking for help to cover the costs of wage increases. the cost of changing our operations to accommodate more retail production, for help with the cost of crop we paid for and cannot use, the cost of lost food service inventory, and the cost of keeping our team safe. I personally am asking for help, and not because this is all about money, but because this business is full of people that my family have worked with for 20, 30, even 40 years in some cases. These are people I consider friends and about whom I care deeply. This is not just a numbers game. These are human beings who have worked hard their whole lives, who love their work and the community of growers and customers we have all known for a lifetime. I received an email recently from a colleague who works in our plant in Laval and has for over 30 years. She wrote, "Please don't give up on us. We need you right now." And so today, I pass along her message. We need you, the Canadian government, on behalf of the Canadian people, to decide that agri-producers, that growers, that rural communities, and that the Canadian food supply chain matters enough to keep us alive, that we as a company full of loyal, hardworking, smart people deserve to survive this pandemic. Thank you for your time.
So thank you, Ms. Kawaja. And now I don't know if Mr. Brubaker is back online, if the sound is okay.
How is that?
Is it okay with the technician? Everything good? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Brubaker, up to 10 minutes, and we'll see how it goes. Go ahead.
Okay, we're a private company, and we're at the other end of the scale from what everybody's talking about, and that is supplying food to the population. We are the other end where we receive food waste, organic waste from agri-food waste, processors, grocery stores, dated product, curbside green bin waste, and we put it through a process to extract all the inorganic material. And the slurry, food slurry, we use to make renewable energy under the renewable energy programs, same as windmills, solar systems, etc. And so we get all this food waste in, and our volume has actually gone up with this COVID-19 because more people eat at home, so we get more curbside waste than we did before. We've isolated our shifts to 2 different shifts to separate the workers, and we've locked the plant so delivery trucks and our people never are in the same space.
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président. Désolé de couper le témoin.
Okay. Oui,
La
Monsieur Perron.
traduction française est particulièrement pénible aujourd'hui. Là, on a de misère à comprendre, puis là, on n'a plus du tout. Depuis
oui,
une bonne minute, là, en tout cas.
Oui,
30 secondes au moins.
Je viens juste d'avoir un appel du greffier. Alors, Mr. Brook, sorry.
Just received a call from the clerk.
Cut it short because the translation cannot hear, quality voice at this stage. So we really apologize for that, but we're going to have to cut it here because we do have to provide translation. So again, thank you for being here, and maybe we'll have a chance some other time to hear your testimony. So thank you. And with that, we'll go to our question round. And Ms. Rood, you are up for 6 minutes. So go ahead, Ms. Rood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your presentation today. Ms. Kaja and Mr. Blodin, I just want to say, coming from Lambton Kent Middlesex, which is where you've opened your new plant up in my riding, your new facility in Wallaceburg. I know that it's been a great addition to the economy there. Wallaceburg has been hurting for many years, and it was great to see that kind of investment. I believe you said $23 million was invested in that process processing plant there. And, the community was excited for these direct new jobs that would come from this processing plant, and also not just in the processing plant, but the farmers that were then now able to supply you with the produce, like you said, the pickle, the cucumbers for pickling, the peppers, and they were so excited. And I heard from some of my farmers in my riding who have said, it's great because we can cut down on our costs. We don't have to freight our products any longer to the United States. As you said, most of the pickles, pickling cucumbers actually go to the US to be processed. So to actually be able to ship them into Canada and keep our crops here in Canada has been great. So we've seen huge reductions on freight from them. And it's great to see that freshly harvested from the field, it's going straight from the field to the factory, whether it's in Wallaceburg or whether it's in Quebec. So thank you for that investment in our community. I just wanted to touch, you said you've had a hard time with labor, and that's also been a bit of a factor. And I'm wondering, with the new programs that have been announced, I'm not sure how much you rely on students for your labor, but we as a party had kind of proposed a plan to try to get students involved in agriculture or agri-processing, because our food supply is obviously, we want to secure our food supply and keep businesses such as yourself here in Canada. So would that program have been helpful for you if we could match students with jobs in the industry? What is it looking like as far as getting the labor force out there? And also for the farmers that you deal with on a yearly basis, obviously with production going to be down, because you've alluded there's a lot of health and safety processes that have to happen, which slows down production, which means you can't produce as much through the facility. Also, you rely heavily on food service distribution products versus retail products. So how is that going to affect the farmers and their supply chain, knowing that they've already planned their crop months ago and they're getting stuff in the ground at this point right now?
I will ask Philip to address that, because I think that he's probably best equipped to, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Yep, I'll go ahead. In regards to the supply from the growers in Ontario, so far the only thing that we've changed is that we had to buy smaller size cucumbers. So we've canceled some contract with pepper growers, because food service, like I said, we're carrying some excess inventory that we cannot afford to replace right now. But in general, the requirements is more for retail. What we lost on food service, we've gained some of it in the retail side. So we're still going to buy quite a bit of stock from Ontario. Labor has been a big issue, and it's still a big issue, not only because of the government program for people who don't have jobs, but also from the fact that daycare centers are closed, schools are closed. So some of the employees need to stay home to take care of their families. So that's been also one of the biggest challenges that we've had. And some people, when we didn't have any case of COVID-19 in the Wallaceburg plant, but if we get people that get symptoms of a flu, we usually send them home, because we don't want to take any chance that they could be contaminating anybody else. We want to keep the business going. We've had more issues with right now with supply from Mexico. They've closed some regions where workers cannot go to the fields to harvest, which is reducing basically our supply right now. So this is pretty much where we stand.
Great, thank you. And I do want to say I appreciate your motto to pack as much as possible to support Canadian farmers, because as we go through this pandemic, we are appreciative of companies who rely on Canadian product to keep our food security going. And another question, you kind of mentioned that you sell to a lot of restaurants, and we are seeing a lot of these small businesses struggling right now to pay their bills. So just wondering how you're able to cope, and if you do have experienced any bad debt from restaurants with them not being able to pay their bills during this pandemic with product that's already shipped, because I know in this industry a lot of things are paid for later and after consumption. So if you could fill us in on that, that'd be great.
Okay, I can give you two information on this. Number one is that a lot of our customers are still not open, so very hard to contact them or to get any payment done on it. We're following that closely. We expect that the bad debts will be probably pretty high, especially we have a lot of customers in the greater Montreal area and also in Toronto, and we still don't know when they're going to reopen. We also, because of the summer crop, like you said, we try to pack as much as possible. And honestly, right now, we have more orders than we can fill, and even more orders than we have capacity in summertime to do. So we'll be running full capacity. But we also have a build-up inventory we need to do before crop. So we have a lot of inventory right now that have kind of a shorter shelf life, less than a year. And we expect that a lot of that is also going to go to waste, because we're not going to be able to sell it before we get to the food business back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blondin, and thank you, Ms. Rood. And now we'll go to Mr. Cody Blois for up to 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Blois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses, and certainly Mr. Brubacher for the attempt. My first questions, I guess, are for Ms. Kawaja. Am I saying that right?
It's Kawaja. It's a Kawaja. Yeah.
Ms. Kawaja, perfect. Obviously, we're seeing challenges in the agriculture sector of differing degrees. Certainly, we've had some testimony on this committee of actually some success stories from local companies and things like that. You mentioned the wage subsidy. Is there any other federal programs that you've been able to take advantage of, including perhaps the emergency business account?
So far, there have not been. I think there was a minor wage subsidy that didn't end up adding up to much of any consequence, certainly not the 75% wage subsidy, and there have been no other options in terms of government assistance to this point, no, and we're in significant need of some.
What's your payroll each year relatively?
What I can do is submit that information to you. Is that later on, if that's okay?
I'm just curious of the size of your company, because obviously the emergency business account is open for those that have wage payroll between $20,000 and $1.5 million. So at least that would be $40,000. And I was just curious as to, certainly there's been a lot of businesses in the agri-food industry that have taken advantage, and maybe your payroll is over $1.5 million, but certainly want to steer you to that.
$1.5 million. Yeah.
It is over $1.5 million.
Yeah, we have about 350 employees, and if fully staffed in Wallaceburg, it'll be about 500 employees.
Okay. Want to talk to you about the labor program. Was labor a challenge before COVID-19 as it related to your business just generally? I mean, you mentioned you had 350 employees, but I assume that these sectors are just challenging at the best of times.
Well, we're new in Chatham-Kent. So there's that. It's hard to answer there. I'll let Philip answer in terms of Quebec. He deals with it more closely than I do, although I can certainly answer, but I'd love to hear his thoughts on it, if that's okay.
Okay, I can answer you. I would say for Wallaceburg, I can give you an idea. So we did an open house beginning of last summer, 2019. And in 2 days, we had 600 people show up to give their resume for jobs. So in that region, it was very interesting. And we were told before we get set there that getting employees would be a bit much easier than another region, just because there was a lot of job loss in the last 10, 15 years. In Quebec, it's been hard. It's been hard on our two plants. There's a lot of competition around. And now what it's doing is basically forcing us to pay more money to get the employees. In the Wallaceburg region, the biggest challenge right now is really, like I said, daycare school being closed. And the program from the federal government, the $2,000 per month, that people would rather take and stay home than come to work. So we see even regular employees that we have that decided to take it, and they say they're scared to work, but we've been supplying them all the equipment necessary and try to work in a safe environment.
We've heard this testimony from other folks in terms of the emergency response benefit. What would you propose then in terms of the government? Because obviously there may be some situations where people may be taking advantage, but for the most part, there's a lot of Canadians that are in need. What is it your position that shouldn't have been introduced, or what exactly would you like to see?
I think it's a difficult, because I think it was a real need for people to get some money if they were to lose their job. In our case, it was not necessarily always people losing their job. It's people that I don't want to. I don't want to interpret everything, but we know for facts in some cases that people are just taking that time off. We know other people have to take care of kids, they have to take care of their parents, or they have people at home that maybe have an immune system that's not as strong, and there's more chances. But we're still in an area where there's no case or pretty much no cases. So, and we're putting out the protective gears and safety measures that we can. So, it's a very difficult question to answer because there's a need for it, but there's also a need to help companies to keep the people there working.
Mr. Chair, how much time?
Minute and 40, roughly.
Okay, I'll move over to Ms. Ventine. I mean, obviously, thank you for your testimony as well. In terms of your stakeholders that you represent, we know that there's challenges. Can you speak to how some of the businesses are actually pivoting or being able to make changes as a result of COVID-19?
Well, sure. So first of all, I mean, we've seen a huge increase in demand. As was stated earlier as well, there's been a loss in the food service market. So our members have had to, cope with losses on that front and rechannel. But really, they've increased demand, have had to work with very difficult supply chains, disruptions to the flow of ingredients, packaging, insecurities of or inability to secure PPEs, and they've been doing this in the context of already having labor shortages within the sector. So, before COVID-19 hit, there was 10,000 person vacancy in the food and beverage manufacturing sector in Canada. And so this only got worse. So if you put it in the context that all of a sudden COVID-19 and people are stocking up and buying a lot of products on store shelves, so our members are responding to that unpredictability of supplies coming in.
Thank you, Ms. Ventine. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Blois. Maintenant, Monsieur Perron pour 6 minutes. Allez-y, Monsieur Perron.
Monsieur Perron for 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Sorry, Mr. Brubaker. Maybe I will give you a few minutes at the end to give you the floor. Maybe we'll be able to do that with a change in translation. So the big issue now is a manpower issue. So, Mrs. Vinton, you've talked about an incentive program for workers and a tax credit for training to help your companies. So, Mrs. Vinton, do you believe that the benefits that are given should be modified in a gradual way so that the people don't lose the whole amount all of a sudden? That's what we had suggested for students. So do you believe that it could be a solution?
Going back to the Canada Emergency Relief Benefit, so the CERB, I think that it was good of the government to act very quickly and respond to the huge demand and serious financial challenges faced by Canadians. So we absolutely recognize that. What we have seen, however, on this, the impact of this is that less Canadians are now applying for the jobs that are now vacant in food manufacturing facilities, including production line workers. We have one company, for example, recently telling me that they have a 50% decrease in demand.
Oui, ne croyez-vous pas, Madame Ventine?
Don't you think, Mrs. Vinton, that if we had prepared it like unemployment insurance, where the penalty is gradual according to the amount received, don't you think this would have been a good solution?
Referring to the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, in particular, that government program?
Prestation canadienne de... Prestation...
Yes, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit or the Student Emergency Benefit. Maybe we could modify it in accordance to what is being earned, like we do for unemployment insurance. Does that help you?
Say to that is what we would like to see, and I think the government's on the right track, is to provide those in the wage top-ups, so to incentivize people to work in our industry. And we would like to see those wage top-ups go to not just healthcare workers who are absolutely essential, but also to food workers. And we understand it's up for the provinces to make that decision. We would like other provinces to take the lead of PEI that they did that. So provide those wage top-ups to workers in our industry. And in addition, to retroactively remove the income tax wage top-ups provided by the private sector. So instead, we look at it as more incentivizing Canadians to join.
Je vous entends bien.
I hear you well, thank you.
77,5 millions qui a été.
You've talked about this 77.5 million that has been proposed, and you said it has already been spent. It doesn't cover your current needs, and it's great time or high time that we have a new announcement. It's getting late. So are you afraid that some businesses will disappear from the environment?
We're at a critical time right now. We, first of all, just to say we absolutely support funding should go to primary producers, primary processors, but our member companies use those very ingredients in meat processing facilities and put them into packages for store shelves. So it is a critical time. What we are seeing now is increasing focus on food security and self-reliance, not just in this country, but other countries are doing the same thing. And we are seeing policies being introduced that are trying to repatriate manufacturing. So we are very concerned about companies leaving this country and deciding to manufacture in other countries. And once these companies are gone, they're not coming back.
Je vous remercie beaucoup. J'irai maintenant.
Thank you so much, Mr. Blondin. On the same topic, let's talk about the marginal support that is given in Canada compared to what is offered in other countries, especially for the agriculture and agri-food sector. Earlier, Mrs. Kawaja talked about being proud of being the only business remaining in Canada, but aren't we afraid that this business could disappear or establish itself elsewhere? So, Mr. Blondin, is it urgent to act now? Isn't there an important difference if we compare the aid here compared to the support in other countries? I would not like to compare to what's going on south of here, but we did talk about the 75% salary benefit. We lost 40% of our sales. So if we build a new plant, we look like we're increasing our sales, but it's not the case. So we lose part of this wage subsidy. In Ontario, we've already increased the salary of $2 an hour, and there is a retention bonus if people stay after 1 month, $3. So there has been a salary increase. Maybe this subsidy could apply to those of us who invest and create new jobs, so we could receive this wage subsidy like other business do. Thank you. Mr. Alistair, you have 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing today. Ms. Venton, maybe I'll start with you in the Food and Consumer Products of Canada, and it's, I think, continuing along the line of questioning that you've already received. You had mentioned that the CERB, ran the risk of disincentivizing workers. However, like when I speak to workers, and not only in my riding but across Canada, they're kind of getting mixed messages, especially the ones in the essential services industry, because we have seen massive COVID-19 outbreaks in some food processing centers. They're getting messages from public health officials that physical distancing measures are very much in place. And some of them also may have family members at home with compromised immune systems or are in regular contact with elderly relations. And when you look at the CERB, you know, it being $2,000 a month, if you look at the average cost of a Canadian household, it doesn't really stretch all that far. So I guess I appreciate the comments that you've made. I guess I'd just like to hear your thoughts on if you take a worker's point of view, the awkward position they find themselves in, because they feel a lot of pressure to return to work, but many, I think, still have very great fears. And in some provinces, there are still some very large outbreaks going on.
Well, thank you for your question. You know, we're absolutely on the same page here. Number one priority is to keep Canadians safe, to keep workers safe, and our member companies, that's absolutely their priority. They want to keep the workers safe, and they want to keep their doors open, and I think that's really important. And our members, you know, have incurred a lot of the costs with the health and safety measures that are necessary and are very carefully following the public health guidelines. The way that we look at it is that incentives are the way to go. Okay, so providing those top ups, and not just to healthcare workers, but also workers who make food. It's extremely important. And then also encouraging the private sector to say, if you want to provide a top up, let's provide you some tax incentive to provide those top ups. So we're looking at encouraging those workers. And I mean, you know, it's interesting. The challenge of getting Canadians excited about agriculture and food is really difficult. And this is pre-COVID-19. And it's very interesting because we see this issue only getting worse. Now, I do want to just say my final point is that we do appreciate Ag Canada, and some of the provinces have really stepped up and with public campaigns to say, you know, this is an important industry. You should be proud of working in this industry, and encourage Canadians. So we want to look at incentives to do so.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate also in your opening statement when you were mentioning just the pressures that your member companies are going through with the increased costs for personal protective equipment, the training that you now have to go through, the physical distancing and so on. And you did provide a brief overview of some of the measures that can be employed, but I'm just wondering, like, you know, when I go to my local grocery store and I can now see that they've got pretty permanent looking plexiglass up. Can you give me a sense of just like the gross costs that companies are starting to incur in installing this equipment? Just any sense of that, of what we're looking at in the months ahead. Like this is going to be a pretty hefty price tag getting our workplaces reoriented in this way.
Yeah, well, we do represent a diversity of, you know, small and large and different types of processing. So it does really matter whether it's that vegetable processing, meat, or further packaged processing. And we are seeing the plexiglass and other barriers, or the staggering of shifts, or rather than just one shift, but having less people, but running 24 hours a day. So for the cost, it really would depend, but we do know it is really significant. I think that from what we are hearing from our smaller companies, it is definitely much more challenging for them to pivot and to absorb these costs, which presents cash flow challenges.
Thank you. And I just wanted to go too on your comments regarding the wage subsidy. And just to make sure I heard it right, because I want to make sure it's echoing what I've heard in my own writing. So with a lot of the essential industries, they have not necessarily seen their gross revenues go down because they're still operating, but their costs have absolutely shrunk their net income. And so is that really very much in line with what your industry members are hearing, and why they're kind of still falling through the cracks of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy?
Yes, and so we are absolutely seeing that very issue, and it's not necessarily showing in the revenue, but the costs are enormous and rising. And one of the big things, and I think it's across the sector and across Canada, is really it's the uncertainty, and it's very difficult in planning, and it's not just generally, but it's securing those ingredients that you expect on time. It's maintaining your storage, maintaining transportation, getting access to PPE. And so that uncertainty is really also absorbing a lot of cost and making it a real challenge to operate.
Thank you. And then maybe for my final question, I don't think it's too early for us to start looking into the future and how we're going to build some resiliency into this system. You know, how are we going to design our food supply system from farm to fork when the next pandemic hits? Do you have any thoughts about, you know, for a long-term vision, how we build that resilience into our system?
Very quickly.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I would just say 3 broad things. We need to keep our facilities open. And that includes targeted strategic investments in a sector as important as food. Number 2, we need to get the workers into the facilities and keep them safe, to your earlier point. And number 3, we need to get the product effectively and efficiently to the customer, whether that's the restaurant, the grocery store, or the export market.
Thank you very much, Ms. Venton. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. And that is all the time we have.
Président, si je peux me permettre.
Allez-y.
Allow me, sir. Are we taking a chance? Can we give a couple of minutes to Mr. Brubaker so he can provide us with the main lines of his presentation, the main messages? Interpreters said that there was not enough quality of sound to provide the service. I'm so sorry, Mr. Brubaker. We need a certain level of sound quality to provide interpretation services. Then maybe he could send to us a summary of what he wanted to tell us, and we could benefit from these comments. I'm so sorry for Mr. Brubaker. This is a very good suggestion. I will invite Mr. Brubaker to submit to us this summary.
Complete, Mr. Brubaker, we apologize for that. And if you want to submit a brief, we will certainly take that into our whole study. And perhaps another time we can have you in as a witness again. So again, this completes our time for this panel. I want to thank our guests today, our witnesses today, Mr. Brubaker from Bio and Power, and also from Food and Consumer Products Canada, Carla Venton. Thank you, Ms. Venton. And also from White Foods Incorporated, Elizabeth Kawaja, and also Monsieur Philippe Blandin. Thank you very much for appearing. I just want to, and you're free to go. I will just have a very short business. I just want to talk to the MPs. Just want to make sure. So this time around, as we had agreed, we will reduce our witness time testimony from 10 to 7 because they had already submitted. We could not do it today, and but the next meeting, which will not be Tuesday, it will be next Friday on the 22nd with the Minister Medencino present. So I think if that's all correct with you, if there's not any issue, I think we had all agreed, but I don't know if there's any issue or any questions on that.
Est-ce que, oui, j'ai une question.
I do have a question, Mr. Chair. Did my colleagues consider my answer by email? I think we should have a second turn so we could have 5 minutes rather than 6 if everybody agrees.
Est-ce que vous avez considéré cette proposition-là?
Oui, comme je l'ai juste eu aujourd'hui.
Because I got this only today, I can ask everyone.
Diminuer le temps de parole de chaque parti pour aller dans le deuxième.
We could decrease the time for everyone if the consensus is there, but I would need the consensus. So maybe we can give the time to other people to get informed about this. I don't have any issue not making a decision today, but I would invite my colleagues to consider this because I think that it would be interesting. And it would give us more chances to have a second round and to have a complete second round. And I have another short question, Mr. Chair. In the library's document, it was mentioned, and I hope that it is an error, but it was a part that was devoted to small businesses. Am I mistaken? I could check with the clerk. Well, I hope so, because there were two major companies that were the last ones. So that's my concern. Maybe we could consider that for the next time. Yes, I will. And Mr. Perron, we will add the 9 to 10 minutes by reducing the opening remarks. So maybe we could deal with that during the second round. Well, you will understand that my concern is not so much to get to a second round, but to have an incomplete second round, because Mr. McGregor and myself were not able to express ourselves. Okay, I will do a follow-up for the next meeting. Okay, thank you very much.
Regarding the witness. If not, I wish you a really good weekend. Enjoy yourselves and stay safe. And thanks so much for your participation. So thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Take care.
See you, everyone.